Ready? 1, 2, 3. Uh-oh. Chris.
Is it me?
will
Oh
you
my
not do it?
god! No! Okay, let me wing
God,
this one.
man.
I'm sorry.
An unserious man.
Unprepared.
Oh my god. I'm so not serious. Fuck me.
This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Let's do a group one. We can put it together right now. The plot of the series man is...
Welcome back to Auteur Detour. First of all, I'm sorry. Is it Auteur or is it Auteur? How are we saying this?
It's either one.
I
don't
say
think so.
Auteur, but I think Travis has been going with the Auteur lately. Anyway.
I'm doing the pure French, but I think both are acceptable.
All right.
I like that. I like that.
That's-
There's like you can interpret it your own way.
And that's the issue I have with Denis Villeneuve is like don't want to have to say Denis Villeneuve a lot. You know what I mean? That's my one kicker. Like, anyway.
And he's not even foreign, right? He's Canadian, right?
I know.
They don't,
He's
do
not
they
even
pronounce it
French. Psh.
They don't
I don't know.
count.
It's Denis. We'll call him Denis. As always, I'm Chris Palazza here with Travis White
Hello.
and Ian Hinckley.
Hi.
This
We're just trying to kill time.
Yeah, why not? This week we're discussing the 2009 Coen film A Serious Man. A Serious Man revolves around a character, Larry Gopnik, who was a physics professor at an undisclosed Midwestern university in 1967. A bunch of stuff keeps befalling Larry. Through no fault of his own, he's being blackmailed by a student. His wife wants a divorce to basically marry one of his friends. His kids act up. His life is just kind of falling apart, basically due to no fault of his own. Stuff spirals out of control. One thing leads to another in typical Coen fashion. And it all gets fucked in the end. Just kidding. It all wraps up beautifully with a really
really good.
Yeah, that was
positive
better than
twist
some
at
of the
the
ones we've prepared, I'd say.
Totally,
Also,
I'm just getting good at
It
this.
also gives me an insight into your idea of the ending because,
Yeah, well, we'll
That's
talk
kind of
about
the
that
debate at
in
this
due time, guys. What did you think about a Serious Man here?
You know, the first time I saw it in theaters, I was extremely bored, and I remember it had like one of the most striking trailers I've ever seen. That was just like really. There's a few moments in the movie where they kind of like hone in on weird kind of rhythmic things happening, and the trailer took that to like an extreme kind of. I don't know, like extent, and I thought it like just looked
no
really
memory of like the
fascinating
marketing
and
for this movie at all.
cool. And when I went and saw it, and it was like so slow and nuanced and kind of repetitive and just kind of like without story, without like any kind of acts, I was just like. I was unimpressed, you know, for a Coen Brothers movie. I mean, I thought there was a lot of brilliant Coen Brothers stuff in there, you know, but as a movie, it didn't really strike me. Especially the dream sequences, which like I literally called like, you know, just to throw this out there, like when the brother gets shot in the dream, like I knew that was gonna happen. Like I knew he was gonna die. Like I knew he was gonna go off a cliff or something. Like I just was like, I've seen this before, boring, like whatever. Seeing it a second time during the day. Right before we recorded this podcast 5 minutes ago, I really appreciated it on a new level. Like you know, if you can get on the movie's wavelength, like into the nuance of it, like I think there's sort of a lot up there to appreciate. Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Well, for me, when we finished the No Country for Old Men episode, maybe all of us, it might have just been me and Chris, were talking about how like it feels like everything after that has, like, in my mind at that moment, feels like a weird, like, kind of epilogue to their career in a weird way in my mind. It's like, not like that I don't think that they have another brilliant movie in them, but I feel like it's just like they're kind of mellowed out, just exploring some more sort of almost more artistic versions of and comfortable versions of things that they had done before,
Yeah.
that aren't quite as manic maybe, or not quite as like, they're way toned down, but it's almost like they're just kind of like, their story is out there. Like at this point in the series of this podcast, like we get what they're trying to say. They who knows? They're not that old. They might like blow our minds and have this third act to their career, but I feel like we get like the Coen brothers thing. And now it's almost just like spinning little tales within that like motif that we already know exists for them. And for me, like, I've seen this movie a few times. I'm going to be humble when I say that, like, I've never understood it, no matter how much I pretended and understand it, until this watch. Like, every other time that I've watched it, which is probably, 3 times, honestly, like, I, you know, I would understand moments of it and then chalk up, like, the things that I didn't understand to the very vague, like, well, I just, I don't know enough about, like, the Jewish experience to, like, understand what they're trying to say in this, or, that kind of thing. But this time I watched it, and whether it's because I have been watching all of their movies so much and I understand them, or if it's just, the time in my life and, like, specifically the week that I watched this movie, I just feel like I understand it completely in a way that I'm like, how did I not get what this movie was about before? Because to me, it's like, I don't know, we all probably will have maybe different ideas. We haven't talked about it, but, like, to me, this is just like, if I can just keep talking for another minute,
Yeah,
so
go for
I'm
it.
kind of blabbering, but if all of their movies, as we've talked about, take place on these two realms of existence, like this, like, things just keep happening to you, but then they're, like, in all of their movies, but then there's this, like, existential larger force, whether it's like God or whatever it is, that's, like, also affecting everything that's going to happen that the characters have no idea about. That's usually the secondary part of their movie. I feel like this is their movie where they're just like, let's just make that the forefront of the movie. Of, like, we're going to place the story of this movie in that existential, like, God threat that's happening, and, like, examine what that part of, like, the effects of a guy who's, going through his own amounts of turmoils that are, like, varying degrees serious. Some of them feel more serious than they are because of this, like, just constant state of doom that he's living in, I don't know. I just think it's, like, their examination of, like, how God affects or, like, faith, really, just, like, how do you believe in a God when the world seems so cruel around you? Like, that's what it feels like to me.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those movies that, well, one, it's obviously feels like the most personal. Like, they've wanted to write or make this movie for a long time, but they're like, it's not now, not now. Then you get, like, a couple Academy Award, or an Academy Award, like, from, No Country, and you can kind of get to do your own thing. So clearly this is, like, them, like, this is what they're, I bet almost every one of these characters is a real person at some point in their lives, like, maybe one of them got actually high before their bar mitzvah or something, and, like,
Well, I did read that was the, like, impetus for this movie, was that scene where, like, talking to the, head rabbi when you're stoned out of your mind at your bar mitzvah. Like, that was, like, the idea that they had, and then they built the movie from around that.
I mean, I do love the idea, and I just, speaking of that scene, that part where he looks over at his friend who also smoked with him, he's just like a vegetable in his seat, is just the best shot, dude. Anyway,
that was good.
But yeah, it feels like their most personal. It feels to me, and this may be kind of a weird thing to say, but it feels a lot like The Big Lebowski and the way that they structure the little details that you probably don't get right away the first viewing. I picked so much up more the second time I saw it, and just little tiny details that seem like throwaways, like, in Big Lebowski, like near the In-N-Out burger, and after the performance they're just sitting there after the car gets smashed and they're just eating this telltale, In-N-Out thing. Just little stuff like that appears in this movie a lot too, especially when you're paying attention to it. I mean, even the second time, I knew he, has a terminal diagnosis, but the first time you see it, because it's the very beginning of the movie, right? He's at the doctor's office, and you never revisit any of that again. It's not even a hint of it is mentioned, until the very end. Just a lot of the little details that craft a world that feels like really real and lived in. None of the characters seem turned up to like a Brad Pitt and Burn After Reading degree to me. Everyone feels like a relatable kind of character, in the sense that The Big Lebowski has quirky, weird characters, but they feel kind of real. Like they know someone that they modeled that character after. They kind of return to their philosophical roots. This keeps reminding me of The Man Who Wasn't There also. So Big Lebowski and Man Who Wasn't There really keep coming up for me in this movie, especially with, like, again, physics and principles. Like, I even refer back again to the Heisenberg principle, right, or the uncertainty principle, in addition to, like, Schrodinger's cat and things like that. So there's a lot of little, like, philosophical layers to this film that probably mean something more than I'm taking out of it, frankly. But
I can maybe get us there when we talk about it more, because I feel like that's what I took most out of it with this watch. But before we do that, I totally agree with you, and like how, you know, more grounded this one feels in a lot of ways, even though it is very, like, you know, it opens with a fable. Like, it's totally not, you know, grounded in that way, but it is, like, I don't know, it just feels calmer in a weird way, in that, like, man who wasn't there way also.
right.
I mean, that's another reason I couldn't get into it, I think, the first time, too, is, like, the characters are... Like, the main character is, like, a blank slate and doesn't give you a lot to, like, sink your teeth in. You know, you just feel like if he had, like, a stronger personality, that he could, like, weather some of this stuff a little better. But he does seem to just kind of be, like, kind of blowing in the wind. He does have, like, Billy Bob Thornton in Man Who Wasn't There, like, neutrality about him that you're just like, do something, make a choice, you know what I mean?
Right,
exactly.
But he feels, like, unable to make a choice. And that is a theme that we see again and again. In fact, he does have a lot of, in his performance, I saw a lot of the guy from Fargo, William H. Macy, you know, in a lot of his, there were a couple moments where he seemed to be, like, almost doing an impersonation of him. And I wondered, like, oh, did he get that right from the Coen brothers? Was that, like, a direction that they gave both actors? Because it was so similar.
This was Michael Stuhlbarg's, you know, absolute breakthrough. Like, he'd been, you know, small TV roles and stuff like that before, and, like, a kind of, you know, unknown basically. And then, like, in the 3 or 4 years after this, he just was, like,
everywhere,
that guy in everything, and which I love him. I think he's incredible.
You have to be great to play this kind of blank lead character and not just be nothing. You know what I mean? I thought of the guy from Get Out when I saw that movie. He barely talks in that movie, but I was just like, he's got such a presence that he can carry you through the movie. And then when you see him in a movie like Judas and the Black Messiah, and you're like, oh yeah, he's like a great actor. That's how he could carry that movie. You know, it's impressively. I mean, it's especially impressive considering how little he does in a way.
Yeah. And you're right. I had that same feeling, but it's, again, you know, that same feeling of, like, just stand up for yourself, do something like that. Like, you want him to have, you know, some kind of, like, authority or something.
And that's a recurring line of his, right? I didn't do anything. Right? What's going on?
Supposed to, like, absolve
What's
him
going
of, like,
on?
everything. When really that's his main
but
problem.
That's sort of my take on the movie also, is that like, you know, relationship that he has with God or whatever, where he's like, you know, I mean, I'm not the first person to say this, and I think the Coen brothers have, like, explicitly stated that it's basically like the Book of Job, right? And he's a guy who is just constantly, to no fault of his own, being tormented. There's nothing that he did to do any of it, and it's him, like, trying to find any kind of order in this universe that just seems like it wants to torment him, right? So he's like trying to sort of reckon with that. And, you know, I think that, like, how that plays in, the thing that was interesting to me this time is that there are several characters that have it worse than Larry in this movie, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even though he's the guy who's, like, like what you would think of as, like, the Job figure, like, Arthur, his brother, who's, like, Richard Kind, is so fucking good and so hard to look at in some ways. You know what I mean? Just like how he's got that thing, and, like, he has a much worse life. Like, and he even says that to Larry at some point. You know, he's like, "What have I got? Butt kiss." You know,
You've got
he's
everything.
Like,
you've got a family. You've got a job.
And he's not wrong in that.
You don't have a giant cyst on your neck that you have to drain with a motor every
And
day.
he's like, you know, clearly, like, it comes out that he's, like, you know, closeted, or, you know, he's just, and also tormented by that because he literally gets arrested when he's trying to, like, live that life.
Well, to me, it's like, you know, he's, what's his name? I literally know none of the actors or characters' names in this, so please bear with me. But Larry, I guess, is the one who, he is, like, tormented by the idea that all of this is, like, unjust, and he's looking for some kind of, almost like number he can plug in, action that he can plug in to make everything make sense, right? Like in a rational kind of way. His brother, on the other hand, like seems to have like a direct line to God through his like mathematical book, and he can like make money gambling and all this stuff. But he's tormented by like the world, actually, like like getting arrested for having sex with guys or whatever, getting arrested for gambling and stuff like that. So I thought that was
that is interesting. I didn't take it as how he has a direct line on with God as much as I thought that like the metaculus or whatever it's called that he's scripting in his little journal was like he's not a professor, he's sign of a schmo, you know what I mean? And that was like his attempt to like find order, like as if he's his own version of Job, and in his like way of trying to find order in this chaotic universe where just everything seems to be against him, is just like, well, if I can find the probability factor in this, where like if I just can map a probability like gene that goes through things, then I can like make sense of this world that like seems to be torturing me.
That
like,
makes
that's
sense.
how I take
That's
it.
a good read too, I think.
Well, there's a running theme too about like the idea of faith versus rationality. You know what I mean? Both the fact that the what is it? Kind of the irony that Larry has all of these cosmic things that are ascribed to God. There's all this religion around him, right? But he's not an inherently really religious man. In fact, he's all about proofs, right? Proving the mathematical certainty of this, that, or the other. Yet at the same time, here he goes, knocking on the doors of different rabbis, trying to find out the answers to things. You know what I mean? So like the answers, do they exist, is another one of those, recurring themes in the movie. Like, is there an answer to any of this? Is the what's the question? No one has any answers. Like the second rabbi telling the story about the goy's teeth, and he's just like, well, what's the answer? What happened? I don't know. What happened to the? Why did they just ask the goy? I don't know. Who cares?
The three lessons
who cares? You should have just done that in the first place. Why did they just?
That's a brilliant sequence. It's one of the classic like Coen brothers, whatever you want to call it. Like it's like just like a separate piece inside the movie that seems like it's just like a music video almost, although that in this case it's not that. But I loved that whole sequence, and to me that was just like, though they seem to be unhelpful, all three of the rabbi visits in this movie, like they do sort of teach the three lessons that he needs to learn, which is that like God is in the parking lot, which like plays out in the end as like God's vengeance is in the parking lot. And then, I mean, that's not what I mean by God's in the parking, but like that's like even more expressing that thing that like God is everywhere. Like just don't pay attention to it, like, or don't try to capture it. And then the second, what the goy's teeth is that like it's impossible for us to try to know God. Like it's bigger than us, like and like that's not, the fact that like it's played comically and he just doesn't, he just says, "Oh, I didn't think that you were looking for a resolution to this story. It's just a crazy thing, right? Like, we can't understand why the fuck God does this shit to us. It's just, we're put here." Which is, again, like, it's, I'm not Jewish. I've only had, like, periphery, like, experiences with, like, even Jewish people in my life, like, through dating them and, like, knowing friends and that kind of thing. But I don't have that experience. But I think it's, like, worth mentioning that, like, the Jewish identity, like, or at least the Jewish, like, I don't know, experience is like more persecuted. I don't think that's a lot to say, like more persecuted than most religions and, cultures or whatever you want to call it. And like, because of that, it's like they carry with them this sort of feeling of like, the third, the third rabbi visit where he just basically quotes Jefferson Airplane and like,
but he doesn't actually visit him. He doesn't even see him though, right?
No, he doesn't. But that's what I mean. Like the third lesson from a rabbi.
Oh, okay.
Being, when the truth is found to be lies and all the hope within you dies, he says it wrong.
Right.
Like to me, that was just like, oh, you want to break in?
Oh no, I want to follow after you're done with your thought, but I have my own interpretation of those three. Yeah.
To me, was just like basically like, I read a little bit about this and like, I'll just quote or, paraphrase what somebody else said because they said it more concisely than I could, is that like God, we're not accountable God's not accountable for what we do. We're accountable for God, right? So like, even though, we can be mad about like everything that's happening to us all around us and stuff like that, but like all of it is God's gift to us as like having given us life. I'm not saying this as like a spiritual person. I'm saying this is just like my read of the movie, because I'm not trying to put my own things into it, but like in terms of like the Jewish faith anyway, of just that thing of like, we can't like, because of maybe what they've been through and the persecution and all that, like this thought that like we can't be angry with God for this suffering because it's God that gave us this suffering. And like, you just have to trust that like God is doing this for us, like we're accountable to him.
Yeah, that took a little bit different of it's kind of similar the way I saw it. And there's so much of like a fable and also like a fairy tale that are interwoven in this movie, like the three little bears, the three little pigs, the three wise men, the three rabbis, so he goes on and he talks to the first one, who's that young junior rabbi guy who's obsessed with this park. Look at that parking lot, Larry, look at all the,
that guy was funny too.
Park anywhere. He's great. I love that guy. He's so good. He's just, he just sits there with his kind of hunched over posture and everything. It's great. Just looking at him is hilarious. But he has this like, loves this parking lot, right? Oh, look at all the freedom, right? When in reality, like, yeah, you can choose whichever spot, but I mean, they're all the same, is there like, that's kind of like challenging this idea of free will in a way, like you have free will, but not really, because you're just going to park in the same spot, basically, doesn't really matter in the end where you park. And the second guy, of course, is this long-winded story that ends up not being resolved. We can't have any answers. There is no answer. We understand God? So yeah, totally agreed with that one. And the third one, he actually is like the wisest one, right? The heralded Rabbi Marshak, the guy, he is like basically God to them in a way, and he can't even get in to see him. God won't see you. He's busy, whatever. So God doesn't even really care to hear what you have to say. So, forget you, and that kind of sums up a lot of the movie for me in a way. It's just like this parable, sort of getting back to the beginning of it, where it's like, this story. And speaking of that part, keep thinking about it, like, is it just a parable? Is it a fable? Or is he like descended from these people where like he's cursed or something? Or there's all these little questions that I have about that beginning part. There's lots of reads
on that, and like Ebert's read was that like the Dybbuk, or I mean the family that like invited the Dybbuk in, whatever, was the descendants, like Larry Gupnik was the descendants of them, and he's just cursed because of that. That's not my read, and I'm much smarter than Roger Ebert, so I'll just, of course. I'm just kidding. But I just think that like, maybe, who knows what the fuck the Coen brothers are thinking, but I felt like it was more just like setting it up as like, this is a mystery that, one of the people, the wife who kills him or who stabs him and potentially kills this man because she has faith that God, like, that she knows God, right? Mm-hmm. And then like, her husband, who is more skeptical of that, and is more sort of logical in the way that Larry Gupnik is, or trying to be, like, sees her stab him and says, oh, you've brought, like, this on our family now. Like, you've done this terrible thing. And, like, then it just fades away and never really comes back to it. And to me, it's just, like, it's setting you up to decide if you're going to believe that, like, faith is the choice, or if like logical fallacies are the choice, or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? Like, whereas like there's no, I don't know. Go ahead, Travis.
I love that first scene. I think, I liked the movie a lot more the second time, but I do think it goes long, and I think certain parts of it, just like, a lot of the parts with the kids, a lot of the parts with like the neighbor and stuff like that. Like, I feel like I've seen a version of that.
Yes.
It's played very flat and very like one-dimensionally, and it's not. And then he has a dream he's having sex with her. It's like, what? Yeah. I don't know. It's just like, it goes, I don't feel like it's as effective as the rest of the movie. And I have to say, that third rabbi visit where he quotes Jefferson Airplane, it really felt like a punchline that I just didn't get. Yeah, you can interject.
100% agree with you. I just wanted to interject with saying, like, I didn't answer when we were initially asked, like, what we thought of the movie, because I do think that there's so much richness in this movie. There's so much, like, brilliant filmmaking in this movie in a lot of ways too, but as a movie, this time watching it, I did feel like once you get past the like confusion of it in a lot of ways, like it doesn't hold up necessarily as like a great movie. And that's what you're talking about is specifically what I was thinking of. Like that punchline with the third rabbi, that is played for a punchline, you know?
Yeah.
And like some of the things just don't, you know, I don't think that it's ever bad. I feel like it's the same thing, like I said last week, where it's like they've just hit this peak now of filmmaking where like they're just comfortable and they aren't going to really fuck up, I don't think.
Yeah, but they're exploring something a little different here, and they aren't making a movie again with like as much of an arc. But it is like The Big Lebowski in the sense that it's these tableaus, you know, where you get and like just for a while, I think it's really cool and really fascinating, and then just after a certain amount of time, it just gets a little tiresome. And like specifically after Cy Ableman dies, basically, it's like. Then it just kind of keeps going, and I don't feel like you get enough new stuff. But anyway, back to the rabbi. And then, like, I did think when he said, be a good boy, it reminded me of Do the Right Thing, when Damea is like, Mookie, and he's like, what? And he's like, do the right thing. He's like, is that it?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
Totally. I like that.
But, yeah, and I think the thing you were saying, Chris, about the parking lot is funny about choosing your car, because, like, they are both, Cy Ableman and Larry are both in cars at the same moment. And like one is at this juncture where he literally has to choose to go or not. And there's no way of knowing if there's anyone around the corner. Right. And then the other guy just takes his eyes off the road willingly and screws himself over because he thinks he has some like beef with some masked man on the side of the road, which was funny to see in 2021. But what was I going to say? I think... We've talked about this before, but there is, you know, I've pointed out in Barton Fink, I think they make it really clear, like Barton Fink versus the like headstrong studio executive, that dynamic of like the fully neurotic Jewish character versus like the Anglo like guy who just has complete faith in himself and confidence.
Which Michael Lerner pops back up in this.
Yeah. As a super qualified guy who doesn't get
Yeah, exactly.
And that's like...
the only Coen brothers, like, previous collaboration, I think.
Yes. No, there's two others, each one of which only appears one time in one scene. So there's three regulars that I counted. Michael Lerner, Steve Park, and Kathleen Borowitz, the wife of Big Dave and The Man Who Wasn't There. She's in one scene, and they're sitting by the lake, and they're talking.
Oh, cool.
That's who that is.
Jewish.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, she's in it. Steve Park,
She's nice.
obviously, is in it really briefly, and then Michael Lerner. But they only have that one scene each, unless I missed somebody.
Right.
Interesting. But yeah, it's an ongoing theme of theirs that I've like noticed before, but watching all the movies in a row again, it's very clear that it's like a preoccupation of theirs. It's an ambivalence both towards like the anxiety and neurosis that's brought about through rationality. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and then
totally.
And in this case, literally quantum theory, where like the more you know, literally means that you understand that like things either are or aren't, and there's no way of knowing that. You know, and then the clarity of someone who, through their self-confidence or delusion or faith or whatever you want to call it, just has complete faith in themselves and the ability to.
Well, and that's how that
act.
first scene plays out.
Exactly. And that's why it's like a perfect encapsulation of that problem.
Exactly.
And
you said it better than I did, but that's what I was trying to say too. It's just like, you know, how do you like? It's like the movie is setting you up to like be on. Not to be on one of these sides, but to recognize both of these sides of like, you can either have like faith in God or be riddled with like confusion.
Well, but there's like a third thing, which is like, I think when the second rabbi kind of exemplifies this, which is just like, you don't care. And I think there's a lot of Coen Brothers characters who don't care, but then there's also like characters who are either like, no, I do know how the world works. Like I'm in charge basically. Or like, people who are like, you know, I don't know,
well,
sort of striving to understand.
That, because like it does open with a epitaph or whatever you call it, you know, like the
opening line.
Quote,
Yeah.
The opening quote, which is, you know, if I can remember
receive with simplicity everything that happens to you.
Yeah, exactly. Receive with simplicity everything that, because it's saying basically that, like maybe the third thing, and then later that's called back with, you know, accept the mystery.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah,
I love that.
And like that's sort of like if they are taking a stance in the movie, I think it's that stance, you know, like,
well, maybe it's like
know.
it's something to aspire to, but to me, again, in the Coen brothers filmography, when you look at the characters, their fascination is with the kind of the strivers and with the kind, like, and also like the awe and wonder of like the big powerful men behind desks who don't accept with simplicity the universe and don't also question anything. I don't know. That kind of like those three forces like acting upon each other, I think is always interesting in Coen brothers movies, but they seem to have the least interest in the characters that just kind of like like Birdie or something, who just kind of goes along with everything.
Right.
Anyway, but I think
and it's also true that like the guy who says accept the mystery, I don't think that there's supposed to be a mystery around whether or not he's bribing him. Like, yeah, and that whole storyline is really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that we haven't really talked about like the earthly challenges in this movie that much, which are worth talking about, especially even though, like you said, Travis, I kind of feel like the young people storyline has been done better, like anyway, not necessarily even by the Coen brothers, but it's just not, this idea, this secondary thing that's happening in the movie, which is that like culture is changing. It's taking place in 1967. Rock and roll has like infiltrated, and it's like, it's this like, there's another read on the ending, even though I haven't said the other read on it, but which is that like maybe this coming storm that's happening is like a complete change and like getting away from this sort of like Hebrew school, like I don't know, uptight thing. And there's like the kids are like looking at that, and like I think one of the last lines is like, that thing's gonna rip the flag straight off the fucking pole or whatever. It's like, that's like not an accidental line.
Right.
Like there's another meaning to this movie there where it's just like, obviously the 60s changed everything. And, I don't think that this movie is like the best portrayal of that, because it's kind of, I don't know, but that's a huge part of it too. It's just like the kid is always fucking stoned. The daughter like doesn't want to be Jewish and is like always, all she cares about is like looking more like a goy, and like it's just like this rejection of like this sort of Midwestern Jewish life that the Coen brothers grew up in, and clearly that they've rejected too. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I think it's more about like a push and pull between cultural expectations of being so devoutly Jewish, which is a very tight-knit, very strict sort of community of people, that need to have a rich heritage they want to preserve, especially after being, removed from your native land and diaspora and whatnot. So there's like a real, incentive for the older generations to preserve that Jewish tradition. Yet at the same time, there's like this American culture that you found yourself a part of that's like, why bother? Like, even if he wasn't stoned when he at his bar mitzvah, would he still have like been able to read any of those letters? No, he just phonetically reproducing the sounds he's listening to. He doesn't care about learning Hebrew. He just wants to, listen to Jefferson Airplane and smoke some pie, So I think
watch
it's
F
like,
Troop.
Yeah, right.
Dad, F Troop is coming in. F Troop. It's so foreign to the dad, yeah. And he like when he says Santana Abraxas, talking about saying words just phonetically, like with no meaning. He's like, I didn't purchase Santana Abraxas. I didn't listen to Santana Abraxas.
We can't make you listen to Santana Abraxas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I never made that connection before, but yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. It talks about God a lot. They refer to forces and God. What do you guys think the Coens are actually saying about God in this movie?
He controls the weather.
Yeah.
He controls
the parking lot.
My end takeaway was that, like, they were saying, like, we can't know God's will, but, like, we just have to trust it. Like, I felt like sort of, certainly not moved. I don't know. I had this, like, intense week, obviously, because my family had this terrible tragedy happen, and that happened a couple days after I watched this movie. And so I watched the movie, and I had taken notes, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I think that it's about like, the Cultural Revolution and what it means and how people are defining their faith in the Cultural Revolution and all this kind of stuff. And then my niece passed away, and I was like, thinking about this movie that day, and I'm just like, you know, we don't have to get into my own faith because it's been various degrees of not having any, you know what I mean, over the course of my life. But then watching it watching it a couple days before that happened and thinking about it just popping into my head over the next week, I just was just like hit with this epiphany of just like, oh no, it's just about faith. Like, it's just about like, how are we supposed to believe when God gives us nothing to believe in? Like, it's giving us so much hurt. And how are you supposed to believe that like there was a plan to this thing? Like, that's my thought for what they were thinking. It was my thought about my own life watching this movie of just like, how are you supposed to think that like there's any order to the fucking chaos that could take a, that could, and then like, I mentioned like other people in the movie have it worse off than Larry. I also mean like Cy Ableman like loses his wife and then dies in a car crash. Like, everybody in the movie has these terrible lives. I mean, he was a fucking prick, obviously, and I love his performance.
So obnoxious,
like,
just yeah.
He's the worst.
So
and
important.
then like,
he and the wife both like are just so like, they make you very uncomfortable. And he keeps touching him, like the way Cy like has his hands all over him.
But I do feel like, I mean, we aren't going to get into it, I don't think, but over text weeks ago, I was talking about how like, I wonder how much of like the Coen brothers' own personal lives affects like the quality of their movies and that kind of thing. And part of me was thinking like, I did some reading. I didn't talk about it on the podcast before because I don't want to spend too much time sort of diving into that. But I did do some reading, and they had, right between their great movies like Big Lebowski and Fargo and their shitty movies like Lady Killers and Intolerable Cruelty, they had a lot of fucking stress. Like, they had, parents died and getting sued by their sisters and all these terrible shit that happens to them. And part of me after watching this and knowing that there are, Jewish people of a certain age that like have been through a cultural revolution and have been through like a pop revolution and all this stuff, have to be, and then have been through like tragedies in their own life, no doubt, as everybody does, have to be sort of like hitting this age in this movie being like, maybe we should think about like whether or not like we believe in God. I don't know. I just felt like it was them being like we always deal with this thing of like, God is punishing us and stuff like that. And this was the first time that it felt like, maybe they were saying that like, it's okay that God is punishing us because, which is the Jewish thing. Like, it's okay that God is punishing us because like, that's our lot in life. And like, if you believe, then it'll be okay. So I do think it's actually a religious movie, to answer your question in the most depressing, long-winded way I could. I do think it's like a religious parable without being like taking it down in a lot of ways, but I might be wrong. It might just be the tragedy talking. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, please go ahead, Travis.
Okay, well, I was just gonna say.
Actually, I'm just kidding.
Ian,
I'm just kidding.
I think that's a great reading of it, and I totally, I think that's completely valid. As someone who like, was born of like the children of like boomer parents who maybe had like some religion growing up and then kind of shed it like in their like adulthood, and was raised like without any faith whatsoever, I still like in this movie, I didn't read it as literally about is there a God or not, but just in terms of like how do different people make sense like of the universe and of like their lives. And I think I've referred to it as like the hand of God in other episodes, but it just means like the hand of the universe or whatever is out there, and kind of like that. So like, sometimes I refer to God because it's like a handy, I like to kind of anthropomorphize the forces that like, torture us or give us, pleasure or whatever. But like, to me, yeah, it was kind of like, it really was just like similar to like the rest of their movies, the way that it looks at to me, like that last shot where he's trying to give the guy the $20 bill, and the guy is looking at the tornado, and it's like it doesn't matter. Like the flag is just a piece of fabric on the pole. The money is just this made up thing. Like there's actually a real universe that has like real meaning and power to it. You know, that's and you know, connecting it to like this, you know, the sins of the father, connecting it to like him changing the grade or whatever, is sort of like, you can do that in your mind, you can create that meaning, but it's there regardless. I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's
exactly
my thought.
Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
And I think that is like, I have heard that in terms of like Jewish faith, that it is more about just like, who knows, you know what I mean? And they say that like many times in the movie, like, we don't know, you know, and yet we have complete faith. Like that is like sort of like a contradiction somehow, you know what I mean? Like, but that seems to be the take they're doing, even if it's not literally religious. It does seem like, and it like they do seem to, like their films reproduce that exact kind of like ambivalence or just acceptance of the mystery, you know?
I think that's a lot healthier though of an approach, as opposed to people who assert that they know everything that their religion says, because there it is right there. You know, I think that dose of we don't know, you know, we really don't know what we don't know, as opposed to, no, it's this way. This person needs to get stoned to death. This person needs to get praised. This person is okay. This person's evil. At least that, I think maybe the experience of the Jewish people has kind of opened their minds to that, like the possibility, like, well, you know what? I don't know. There's no sense to be made of any of this stuff. You know, it could be this way, it could be that way. Who are we to try to understand God? You know?
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, another fundamental principle of the Jewish, like, religion is that like they are the chosen people, and like they are the you know ones that like God has like chosen to like suffer these burdens so that they can like ascend, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean,
but at least they're not trying to like recruit you. That's what I appreciate.
No, absolutely. And listen, tragedies aside, I have like, you know, I'm not going to the memorial will be the first time I've been in church. This last wedding I went to. It's not like I'm, you know, in any way. It's just a thing that like opened me up, as any kind of tragedy like this does, to being like the movie does, where like, Travis, you encompass that final shot perfectly to me, because I do think that like that's the most difficult shot in the movie to me, more so than like the parable at the beginning, is just like, what does that end mean? And I think you said it perfectly, because it is that thing of just like, when something like this happens, or when I say this, I mean to me, or when something like, you know, him getting some diagnosis from the doctor that maybe sounds like it's going to be some terminal thing, clearly, although, you know, it's also unknown, but it's just that like, you have these moments where you're just like, oh shit, like you said, like it's bigger than this. Like, like no matter how, like, I guess there are like true atheists in the world that are like, nope, like doesn't matter. It's all, we're all, but like most people, when they're like staring death in the face in a certain way, are like, oh shit, like maybe, I'm not saying I believe in anything or what I believe in, but I do know that like it opens your mind to like, what I do believe in is that like, it's not about that $20 and it's not about that flag on the flagpole. Like there's something bigger happening. Like there's something that's like, you know, like you said, it's like you use God, but it's more just like, you know, this fucking insane, I don't know. I think you said it right. Cut that out. Just kidding.
Well, I got thinking about, switching gears a little bit, the title. And it kind of brings up a few things. What do you guys?
Did,
yeah.
No, you go, Chris.
Well, it's called A Serious Man, and the only time that the person that they refer to using that in the film in the context of the movie, of course, is Cy Ableman. He was a serious man who was a serious, you know, has said it more than once.
Well, he says it about himself.
Well, almost, right? So that's the interesting thing. Right. He can't say I'm a man. He doesn't say the word man, right?
Which is kind
of also, yeah. And which really kind of touches again back on this idea of one of their themes of manhood and being a man. What is being a man? You know, I know this kind of comes back around all the time, but I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
He never actually says, you know what I mean? He can't get himself to say it.
I mean, in the past, watching this movie, that was one of the takeaways for me. Watching it this time, and maybe because I was watching for that, because it was so prevalent in so many of their movies, I was kind of shocked that like my memory had betrayed me and that like it's not a bigger part of the movie. Like in my memory, like that was a lot of this was like this guy who got like, to use 2021 parlance, like this guy that got cucked and he's just like trying to find his manhood again, you know, like. And like watching it this time, I'm like, it's definitely there. There's moments like that where like he's so beta and like, you know, just like can't like get any. I'm sorry, I'm just using these like dog whistle shitty things. I'm a Democrat, I swear, or a liberal, I should say. And but anyway, like he's this guy that like, you know, he's a soy boy. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no,
but,
for hundreds.
You know,
Soy boy?
100%.
Oh,
kidding.
wow.
No, but he is. And like, you know, that's a part of it. But I remembered it being like a big part of the movie. And it's really just like his character. Like, it's not like explored in the movie of like the way that it was in something like Miller's Crossing or Man Who Wasn't
Right.
There.
And that's why I feel like the movie comes off a little, I don't want to say like shallow, but like, you know, yeah, he sees the guy playing baseball with the son and he kind of contrasts it with himself and he is neurotic about it. I mean, it's very simple. And I honestly think it could have been like a 45-minute movie in some ways. And I know, you know, and I feel like parts of it are just kind of stretched out.
Yeah.
Can I throw something crazy at you guys?
Yeah.
Speaking of like, manhood and stuff like that, I was just thinking, and maybe this is completely unrelated, but, you know how like a few years ago, a big catchphrase was like the future is female, and like the country was basically ready to elect like the first female president. In fact, the popular vote, like, you know, was millions in favor for having a woman as president. Here we are, like barely 5 years later, and like the whole concept of gender is now like suspect. And I was just wondering, like, of course, like a big part of that is like the LGBTQ like movement and like, you know, striving for rights and like, but just like literally, it seems like the moment like popular culture became aware of the idea of transgenderism, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, gender's bullshit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm not a man. No, of course not. Like, I just wonder about like, it just seemed like that happened so fast. And I think a big part of it is the fact that if you look at like any kind of like thing about like how much money people are making, how much people are having kids, like all these traditional things that like the way the 20th century set up, like here's what it means to be a man, here's what it means to be a woman, like the kind of nuclear family archetype. And then like society literally let that crumble. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like rap music, it wasn't like video games, it was literally an economy built against like keeping that family unit together. And then the second it was just like, well, wait, what if there is no gender? What if that's just made up? And literally everyone, like a huge amount of people are just like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. I just think that's kind of interesting. Watching the movie today, I was just kind of thinking about that.
It's interesting.
Like the collapse of the family unit and like the or the like this, you know, this can't hold, like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, I think.
Yeah.
It sounds
kind of unrelated.
Sounds
but
valid. Well, I don't know. I mean, that kind of ways like goes into what we've already touched on, but like that thing of like, you know, how the younger people in this movie are like, seem to have no, like, I mean, it is weird that Michael Stuhlbarg's character listens to, you know, like Jewish chanting on records in his house, and he like goes to see he turns to Rabbi Mashnik, like especially when he's like faced with this like unknowable thing that he's like constantly trying. Like he really does seem to have some kind of religious, you know,
I think
at
he
least
is religious.
At least
yeah.
want for religious, you know?
No, yeah.
But at the same time, and this might just be like a movie thing of like having to explain to the audience, but like the fact that like he doesn't know where to get is, and like there's things that like happen in the movie that like, you know, a few times some people describe to him what he should do as if he's in the same way that he is in his life, sort of like just going through the religious part of it without having any like true, I don't know, belief or something like that. Like, I don't know, just the fact that like in the same way that maybe the kid is just like learning the Torah by rote or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I just thought it was weird. That was the main thing, was that like, when Cy Ableman says that he needs to get his wife a get, and he's just like, a get? Like, he doesn't even know what the hell they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I mean, I don't think I learned what that was from this movie. I think it's like something that at least a Jewish person would know. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
There's like
I
three
thought
different
but
people
again,
that don't know what it is either. Like the lawyer's like,
Right.
a what? And then the first rabbi is like, a what? oh,
And
yeah,
there was
yeah, I
another
get it.
thing that I can't remember what it was at this point. I didn't write it down, but like I think it was something that the lawyer said to him that he had to do that was like a Jewish thing or something, whatever it was. And I was just like, it's weird that they're like telling this guy who listens to like Jewish chanting or whatever, like readings of the Torah or whatever in his house, and like, turns their up, like doesn't know these like pretty baseline Jewish things. Like, I don't know. That was kind of weird. But again, that could also be a failure of like how, movies will do that, where like if they're talking about something that they assume that culture won't know as a whole, then they'll just like exposit it, and
Yeah.
just be like, oh, a get that thing where you like religiously let go of your wife.
Yeah, but it also kind of speaks to the fact that like he thinks that he keeps saying he thinks his life is one way, he's picturing it one way. Like the fact that he knows all these songs and stuff like that, and he goes to services or whatever, but then when it actually like I don't know, like his life is going to be changed by it, it's like all of a sudden strange to him, right? I mean, like it's sort of like out of context, like you said, even the rabbi doesn't recognize the word because he says it like without the Hasidic accent, maybe, and he I think he pronounces it like ever so slightly different. Oh, a geth, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, so it's sort of
I don't know. I kind of got sidetracked there, but I was bringing that up to say that like, what you were talking about, like the dissolution of the family unit and stuff, is more in this movie about how like I get how you would get there, is because like the kids don't seem to have any sort of interest in it, and like I don't know.
Well,
it
just
seems
like
like there is a part of this movie that is that like what you thought was like whole is not going to be like that forever. It's like,
well, just like the inability to accept like the identity of like I'm the man of the house, and like why people nowadays reject that. And it's like, if you aren't like the breadwinner for your family, it's like, well, isn't that what like a man does? Like if you're not planning on ever having kids, you know what I mean? Like the concept of womanhood is like kind of different, And I was thinking of like, because like birth rates just like dipped below like death rates, I think, for the first time like in American history or something like that. I just read. So it just made like there is like a radical shift happening, and it's like affecting people's consciousness. Like, I mean, even when I refer to Jenny as my wife, the term wife just sounds old fashioned.
I totally know what you
like
mean.
that's just a very old fashioned
totally
word.
get it.
Like so it's just like, I feel like I don't know, it's just interesting that all these like the way, I don't know, like I feel like there's like another revolution happening, maybe not for the like maybe there's positive aspects of it, or there's like powerful aspects of it, but it's like there's nothing good like in the future.
I when you started, I was gonna say, and this is not funny nor worth saying, but I did think that you were like leading me to ask you like if you thought that like the reason why so many people are like okay with like or like coming out as trans or something is because men are like, well, if the future's female, then I'm gonna be female.
Yeah, no, I think like no, I mean like there's like if you saw someone with like a future is female like shirt or something like nowadays, you'd be like, that's incredibly dated. But it's like really, it was like like 4 years ago. It was like it's such the reason. Like we like we hit like basically what I would say like a very we reached a point where America was, like I said, ready for a female president, just on a very surface level, incredibly shallow level. Like we were accepting gender equality or some percentage of us,
like,
and then the next day that battle is over, and now it's like this whole other world. Or it's just going forward like into these new territories so quickly that it's just kind of amazing, and it seems like it's a byproduct of like these social forces that are like, you know, again, pushing, like keeping people living with their parents and stuff like that, and keeping people from having children. And these are not like negative things necessarily, but our culture doesn't have, you know, like doesn't have like a healthy view of these things, or like a version of like, okay, this is how you are in this thing. So it's just like, again, like transgenderism became like a pop culture thing, like, you know, let's recognize these people. And then a million people saw that and saw themselves in that struggle somehow, you know, or recognized some part of themselves in that. Just interesting.
Absolutely.
I think it might give voice to something that people might have never quite been able to voice themselves, you know, and you see something inside you and you don't want to like say it out loud. I mean, it's not a coincidence too that, you know, when Trump was elected president, now everyone's like, yeah, I can be racist now outwardly.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying, you know, the zeitgeist allows those without, you know, they didn't feel they had a way to voice it, of real voice in that point. Or at least the idea to like express like, oh, maybe this is a possibility for me. I've always felt something,
just to tie it into this podcast and how much we talk about that. But that's like why representation is so important. I feel like is because like, you know, when we talked about how like, you know, whether or not we kind of disagreed on this, but like whether or not like culture is like driven by movies at all, like, I think like the only argument that I have to stand on in that is that like what you're saying, Chris, is that like, you know, when you see something on screen, like it gives you a voice again, like it like lets you use your voice, I should say. I don't know.
There's an amazing scene in a movie by Todd Haynes, Velvet Goldmine. Have you guys seen that movie?
Of course.
Christian Bale is this young kid in like working class exactly England, and he sees this like news report or something, or maybe it's just like it's some sort of, he's watching TV with his parents. He's like a teenager, and there's all these like kind of queer and like flamboyant like rock and roll kids like out in this club scene, and it's a fantasy that Christian Bale's having, and he's like ecstatic, pointing at the TV to his parents like, that's me, Mom, Dad, that's me, that is me, that's me, that's me. And it's just happening in his head for a moment, but it's like so powerful and so good.
Absolutely.
I love Christian Bale. Can we talk about Christian Bale for a little?
He's great.
I would love to. He's great. Well, let's use that then, just to go in really quick to who. Are we okay with all the castings in this movie? I mean,
totally. 100%.
I think that it's impossible to recast this movie because they purposely like didn't cast anybody. Like the most famous actor in this movie is fucking Five-ish Finkel, who plays like the Dybbuk, you know, or the Dybbuk question mark as he's built.
Who's that?
Yeah,
I didn't even know.
He's just like an old character actor that was been around for like every TV show from the 60s, and you know,
he was good.
Well, Alan Rickman is in it technically.
Wait, what?
No, not really. So the guy in the very beginning, the husband in the Fable, the dude's name is Allen Lewis Rickman. I'm not joking. I was just looking over the cast going, do I recognize any of these people? Just for that very reason, actually, to your point. Like, Alan Rickman? Are you kidding me?
But they clearly like went from their most, Burn After Reading being like their most star-studded movie to just this like truly bunch of nobodies. Like Richard Kind certainly had been like
some sitcoms and stuff like that. Yeah, he was great.
Stuff like that.
He's amazing in Sharknado too, by the way. I know you guys have seen that one.
Believe it or not.
The first one.
But no, I mean, I think that like where he does shine is the Pixar work that Richard Kind does. I think he's fucking brilliant. He's great.
Bing Bong.
Bing Bong tears me apart.
Yeah. But great cast. The lawyer of Larry's lawyer has kind of like a more approachable George Clooney kind of vibe. Like
totally,
he has that look
totally.
To
I was thinking the same thing.
George Clooney. I was like, I feel like they were going for like the Jewish George Clooney is what they were with him.
What was I going to say? Oh, but so I wouldn't recast it. I did read who else was up for some of the major roles.
Let's hear it.
And I guess Patton Oswalt almost was Larry Gepnick, which would have been interesting. Totally weird. And Mark Maron also was up for that role. I don't know. Yeah. It's like these are terrible choices.
I'm glad they didn't go with that.
I'm really glad.
I don't know. I could see a version of this movie with Patton Oswalt as the main character, where
I could
like
too.
you put the pace like twice as fast. You like play up all the goofy stuff. You emphasize the punchlines. And that could be
I do think,
I don't want to say a
just to
stronger
get-
movie, but like a
I do
rollicking
think
movie. Like,
I wouldn't recast Michael Stuhlbarg in the part that he ended up playing. But like I said before, I don't think that this is the best version of this movie. Like, I do think that, like, I don't know what I would change, but it just doesn't, like, it's just not great. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's good. It's really amazingly shot. Roger Deakins, again, is fucking incredible. It's like, they're just, the Coen brothers pacing is perfect, like, all the time in terms of, like, comfort pacing, I guess.
yeah, I was
going
gonna
to
say this. It's hard to say there would be a better version of this movie because it barely feels like a story. You know what I mean? It really feels like they're just hanging out, filming these little vignettes, and so it's hard to say there would be a better version of the movie, but without completely changing what it is. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
Which is more just like a meditation.
But I do think that,
or like a
like
book,
you said, like an angry Jewish guy like Mark Maron, or like a more I don't know how I would describe Patton Oswalt, but like a different.
If you make him suffer in a way that is
like,
enjoyable, in this movie, it's like this guy is suffering, and you're just like in this plight with him. And
but is he really suffering that much? I mean, yeah, his
mentally
kids
he's
fucking
suffering.
suck.
He's like
mentally
he's suffering mentally. And if you put it on Patton Oswalt, who can like and let him like go like, what the fuck? What is going? You know what I mean? Like that could be a really funny movie. And I think if you just again you like adjust the knob of like the I don't know, like the percentage of humor that they're bringing to it or whatever.
I would almost guarantee, unless there's some hand of God thing that happens, that like in the next 30 years, we're going to get another version of this movie from the Coen brothers, because that's what they do. They just sort of, cycle through the stories that they want to tell and then tell them at different like settings.
Well, I was going to say, it almost felt like this was, something like, this definitely shares a lot with like Barton Fink. It definitely shares a lot with like
Man Who Wasn't There.
The Man Who Wasn't There. Like, yes, exactly. But it all the storytelling thing that I've been talking about, where somebody does makes a choice that's like doesn't seem like a big deal, and then sets up something horrible. It's almost like this movie is just all that choice and all getting to that place where you make the choice, and then him erasing the grade was that. And then which happens in the last like 1 minute of the film.
Well,
and then you start to see the
like,
repercussion, and then it's like the end, and then that's the whole
why
thing.
like my major thing, like in the initial watch of this, not the initial, but like my watch of it before I had my own little weird religious, like, or spiritual struggles this week, however you want to call it, was just that like this is them like just completely taking every but like how sorry, I'm fucking stuttering. The how a single act can like how dare you?
That's you. No, I was doing. That's you. You're like that.
Oh, I thought you were making fun of Chris.
No,
okay,
no.
that's fine.
Dare you?
Just kidding.
How dare
how a
you?
single act can like spiral out of your control kind of thing, and how like in this movie it's like the whole thing is from that thing where it's like, oh, you have no control.
Yeah.
Like, a single act is just like, it's you trying to maintain some kind of control in this universe that has no interest in whatever the fuck you're trying to do. I don't know.
Agreed. Shall we?
Who wants to rate them?
It's really hard. This one is really hard to rank.
It's really hard.
And
to
now
rank.
we're at,
This one's
we
in the
have,
middle
like,
for me.
We have like a baker's dozen of movies now, so it's getting harder and harder to.
I think this one.
I'll just do it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was gonna say I got mine. It's pretty much right in the middle, so my order doesn't change much, but I moved up Blood Simple a little bit. So I still have No Country for Old Men at number 1, then Fargo, Big Lebowski. Blood Simple is now number 4. Man Who Wasn't There. Serious Man actually comes right behind it. I really like Serious Man. I liked it a lot more this time. Maybe it's because I just watched it again, but it's right there in my mind. I just think about it a lot more than I have some of the other ones. Then Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Raising Arizona, Barton Fink, Miller's Crossing, Hudsucker Proxy. They're just like the lower tier ones. Burn After Reading, Intolerable Cruelty, and Lady Killers. Boom. So it's right there in the middle.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I get it, and I kind of like, I'm gonna be similar with most of these, because it's like I said, I don't think that you can fault this movie in its in what it's trying to do. I just think that like as a movie, it's not as strong as some of their like classics to me. I don't know. Even
No,
though
totally.
it's really interesting.
Totally.
I got Fargo #1, No Country for Old Men, Big Lebowski. Really, those top two, those fucking top two movies are just like canonized perfect movies. I like Big Lebowski again, so fucking good. Miller's Crossing is still high for me because I just love that movie my whole life.
Boo.
Raising Arizona, Blood Simple. Then I've got Serious Man. Then Man Who Wasn't There, Burn After Reading, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, Barton Fink, Hudsucker Proxy, and then we don't need to talk about those other two fucking shitty movies.
They don't
So for the
exist to
first
us.
14 episodes in, I finally remembered that we do these rankings, and I prepared it in advance.
Nice.
So I'm gonna be brave and actually give numerical rankings for my top 4.
good.
So
Ooh.
I'm gonna say #1, Fargo. It's so good. I love it. #2,
Yes.
Raising Arizona. #3, No Country for Old Men. #4, The Big Lebowski. That's my top tier. And then literally like a hair below Big Lebowski is The Man Who Wasn't There. Then Burn After Reading. Then Blood Simple. And Blood Simple is kind of like the dividing line on its own strata. Right below that, the trio of Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, and Hudsucker Proxy. I'm going to add A Serious Man into that.
Yeah,
Because
that's
to me,
I
it
get
fits
it, yeah.
right in there. It's like it's
Totally.
one of a kind. It's like successful in what it does. It's not perfect, but it's like, there's so much richness there that if you say, just like those other movies, like this is my favorite one, it's like, well, what else would be your favorite one? You know what I mean? There's nothing even comparable to it, really. So, it's a fascinating movie. Put it in there with them. Next down, again, another full layer down, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Followed by, I think, for some reason, I feel like it's really important that I rank the bottom 2, like which one is the worst.
I've got Lady Killers as the last one.
I
since
know, but it's
didn't
like,
say it.
I feel like it's like I need to get like a mathematical equation, like fill a chalkboard
Yeah.
like Larry and be like, which
that
one?
chalkboard is a beautiful
I
visual
laughed
of this
at
movie.
Intolerable Cruelty.
Yeah.
I really did. You know what I mean? And like was it that one or was it Lady Killers? They're both worthless and forget it. They're not.
worthless,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also, they're worse than worthless because they actually are offensive. Like to me, like especially Lady
Yeah.
Killers is like it offended me.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
said,
Okay.
well said.
Well, that's our ranking. That was fun. That was a good talk, guys. Ian, I know you've been through a lot. Thank you for doing this episode with us, and I really, all the best to you and your family. Like, I just want to
you.
put that
All
out there
love,
to the
man.
universe. We love you. Thanks for
Yeah.
getting us together to do these talks.
Definitely, dude.
Hey,
Thank you.
I owe you guys for it because it's fucking changed my quarantine. It's been the best.
Awesome.
All right, we're almost done with this series, but we got next week True Grit.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yahtzee.
I think
True
so.
Grit?
Yeah, I'm thinking of.
Got that right, Pilgrim.
We should get together and watch the last one in person or something
God, I
like
would
that.
love that. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Except for it's
Or at least do
fucking- yeah.
Hamlet when it comes into the theaters. Or what's it
Yes.
called?
Macbeth.
Macbeth. Sorry, yeah.
Fair is
that'd be
foul
bad.
and foul is fair. Hey, let's do it, guys.
All right, guys.
Till the next
Good
time.
talk.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.